How about you show us a little bit about how you grade people, or how you assess that they're a good fit for the job?
So with regards to a client, if it's a large client, our client may have 7 or 8 or 9 different simulations going on within their company in different roles.
Right.
One could be a brand new inside salesperson. It could be, another one could be an account manager who's working outside. Another one could be a sales manager. So we want to move our account managers to sales managers. So we want to see them in that type of role.
Sure.
That's when we do that with a very large financial institution in Canada, where they look at, when they're moving their advisors, they will not move an advisor into a manager's role until they simulate the manager's role.
Interesting.
And it is an eye-opener, because here's what happens, especially in sales. We tend to want to move our top salespeople into management. That's kind of the qualifier.
Sure.
It's the wrong qualifier. And we see a lot of organizations, especially in the financial institutions, where if they move them and they fail, they don't go back to that position, they leave the organization.
Right.
But there's a lot of individuals within the organization who are average at best in the sales role. But when you put them in the activities of the manager-director role, they shine.
Excellent.
So that's what you start to see. So
right, that's what you need to know.
Our client would have all these different activities, and then these steps, we call simulation steps, will depend on how many they want to see. So if we were actually just to go into A to Z simulation, again, we're using our demo site here. What this does is that's going to take us in to the system, and you'll see that we have different activities here. We have, and this is a really good example. Some of our clients are actually bringing their online assessments into our system, and they're bringing their first interviews. So when we have a large organization where they may have 30 or 40 branches across Canada, one of their concerns is consistency of the first interview. They know that all their managers are doing it haphazardly. And they're coming back saying, we want to move forward on this candidate. Our client actually has added, some of our clients have added the first interview into the system. So our system has it embedded in so that when they're going to be doing their first interview, the system emails to the manager the first interview.
Okay.
And they actually follow the screen.
Right.
But when they do the interview, they actually have to score that candidate on key competencies. So now if we have 30 managers interviewing across Canada, they're all asking the same questions and they're all scoring on the same competencies.
I see.
So now we're bringing objectivity and consistency from a hiring perspective.
Wow.
Okay? Also from the online we do it, but let's just take a look.
Maybe even on the analytics of how they score as well.
Yeah, I'll just go into, it really depends on what we have built in here, but you'll see here, in this case here, that on the competencies that the client has picked up, they want to understand, does a candidate have empathy? What are their oral communications, written communications? What's their creativity, innovation, thinking? And in this case here, their enthusiasm. So if you go up to our, again, this is our back end of our system, how they would set it up. But you'll see here on the competencies that the client has decided these are the weights that we want to put with regards to from the scoring perspective. So that when we score a candidate, obviously oral communication in this case is the most important. So when a candidate or the manager is going to score someone, the system emails them on their BlackBerry the template of these competencies, and they simply score it.
Wow.
Now those managers, in a lot of our clients, the managers will be 2, 3, 4 managers in a simulation.
Right.
We can then decide what the weight we want to put on each manager's score. So if we have someone who's clearly in the field a lot and they really understand what's going on, we may want to give them a higher weight. So that's going to give them a complete score of the candidate. So, and give you an idea, with regards to tasks, our system then, when we want to send something out, the client now can define when I want them to be invited, when we want them to start the activity, when it's ended, and when we want it to score. So the system is telling when all these things should happen, when the email should go out, when the score should go out, and when it should be back in.
Very comprehensive.
So now, in this case here, just to give you an idea, again, this is the back end side, but from a self-score, this is the email that the candidate receives or the manager receives, and here are their scores, and they submit them. It takes all that information, so if I just backtrack here.
Sure.
And I'm just going to backtrack and get out of here. And I'm just going to go back, and we'll just pull this candidate back up here. So if we have all this information, here's the key part, are these lines, line graphs and the bar graphs.
And that's what we were looking at before.
That's
now
right.
this is actually where I would see it from my perspective of where I'm weak and I need to train people better.
But before we do that, we're going to look at the scorecard and just show you that we can actually, through the simulations, where we can actually assign these weightedness. So in this case here, you'll see in those activities, the client has assigned all these weights to those activities. That's going to define our score. So if I go back to the line graph, and again, this is exactly what the client receives, you'll see that we start to get these graphs. And this is a point, Robert, that you made out. Let's just assume we're not hiring right now. Let's assume this is my existing sales team.
Right.
And that activity there that has dropped down in number 4 is a highly weighted activity. Let's say it's what we talked about earlier. It's that face-to-face communication with that client. All of a sudden, as a sales manager, I'm looking at this going, we have a major problem here.
Sure.
And I have a limited training budget. That limited training budget is going right there.
Absolutely, and it could be that you're putting it in the wrong place. If they're high in a certain area, it's like, well, why are we spending money on this? We obviously have this down. We need to be spending it right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of people would think that your product is just for hiring. It, as you said, it could be your internal force that you already have. You're always internally hiring anyway or moving people up the ladder, but you have no way of weighing it.
When we started the company, we just wanted to be a simulation company. We wanted to work on all different levels of positions because we knew there was an issue. The biggest issue I knew the clients would love it, but the question was, would the candidates like it? What we have found out, the candidates love it. The candidates are finally saying, thank goodness someone's concerned about me. But with regards to when we started the company, we thought it would be for all different levels, but probably 85% of our business is sales management. Not that we wanted to be in that business. But every time we'd do a project outside of sales, we'd get a phone call back saying, now can you come into the part of the organization where it's driving us crazy? We're pulling our hair out.
Absolutely.
So, and that's where you can really see an ROI. But if you take this as example as a hire, rather than looking at someone internally, this is an interesting thing. So here's what the system allows you to do. If you look here, we have Andrea Walker and we have Wendy. We have this other candidate here that we haven't scored. But if you look at Andrea, these are her self-scores, how she saw herself, and here's how we as a company have seen her. And again, those scores from the company could be one manager or it could be weighted scores of multiple managers. But we have this toggle switch over here, and our clients use this all the time. Again, they can use it on their BlackBerry, that we can go in and say, look, let's just get rid of Wendy, and let's take a look at Andrea.
Right.
And now we start to look at where the gaps are. Interesting, she's fallen down here, she sees this, but there's major gaps here, depending on that weight.
So her assessment of herself is different than the assessment of the team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where we sometimes see candidates where their assessment, and our job is to make sure that the candidate scores themselves accurately, meaning we tell our candidates, in the simulations, be who you are. Don't try to be who you're not. Because if you try to do that, it'll fall apart.
Right.
Secondly, with regards to scoring, you're going to be matched against the client, so score yourself on truly how you see yourself, not how you think they want you to see them. We get candidates where they score themselves, 4.5, 4.2, all across the board, and we have some clients who are scoring them at 3, 3.25, and that gap tells us that we're going to have a training issue when that person comes in, compared to a candidate who sees themselves clearly. So if we take this candidate and we move, and we actually now bring in Wendy, and let's get rid of Andrea, we can now start looking at this candidate here. And this
Which is much closer. There's very little gap.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's an assessment of this candidate from Wendy's perspective. Now we can go back and say, well, look, why don't we just look at the company scores? Let's just take Wendy's self-score, and let's just look at how we as a company have seen these two candidates. And now we're starting to see that. Now, so that's interesting. But now we can take all the information that we have and start looking at it from a bar graph. So we're going to bring everything together, and our clients now can have a benchmark. And let's say that benchmark is 4. And we have clients who actually have that line right across for a benchmark. And here in this situation, we have 3.83 and 3.6.
Wow.
This is a tough decision.
It is.
So the client now, again, can go back into that data, can go back into that graph and say, let's take a serious look at this. Now, I think I mentioned to you before, but what we can do with this, let me just go back here. Oops, give me one sec here.
Sure.
Go back to this line graph. If that is a real concern of mine and we're close to it, again, I can go back into this information. I can say, well, you know, Wendy really did look like the candidate we wanted, and this was the concern here. Let's get on the phone, let's talk to 2 or 3 of Wendy's references, and let's ask specific questions about this information.
But specifically on the result of number 4.
Number 4.
You don't have to worry
Yeah.
or concern yourself on the other results because we think they're fine.
Secondly, what we can do is if we think Wendy is the right candidate, we can sit down with Wendy with her information. And we can sit down and say, you know, Wendy, this is what we've seen. You've seen it as well. You've done very well on all these activities. However, in an area that we think is really important, you really struggled and you realize that you struggled. Can we talk about it?
Right.
Let's talk about, if you were to join us, maybe what the first 2, 3, 4 weeks look like. In this activity, whatever the activity is, I'm going to have a senior person hang around you for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and deal specifically with that. So now your eyes are completely open with regards to who the candidate is, and from a candidate's perspective, their eyes are open with regards to what the opportunity is and potentially where my issues might be. It's all about risk management. Robert, we define risk management as simply gaining additional information to make a better decision.
Right.
Get
That's a
more
great way to
information
think of it.
to make a better decision. All we're doing to the client, this is not brain surgery.
No.
Our technology really helps them make a decision, but all we're doing is we're giving them data to say this makes sense. From a candidate's perspective, we have had, I would say probably anywhere between 8 to 10% of the candidates, as they go through the simulations, will pull out of the simulations. Not that they don't like the simulations, but that the simulations have shown them that this is not the right job for them.
Perfect. Well,
And that's what we want.
that's a great barometer, and you have to have those in companies today. Things just happen so quickly.
Yeah.
You can't be worried about those processes. You have to know who your good candidates are.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate all your time. It's been
Our
awesome.
pleasure.